Super Typhoon Haiyan, also known as Yolanda, struck the Philippines in November 2013. With winds reaching 195 mph and storm surges over 20 feet high, it became one of the strongest tropical cyclones ever recorded. The typhoon devastated Tacloban City and surrounding areas, leaving over 6,000 people dead and millions displaced. Entire communities were wiped out, and the aftermath required massive international aid. The disaster highlighted the urgent need for better disaster preparedness in the country. The 1991 Mount Pinatubo eruption was one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions of the 20th century. After centuries of dormancy, the volcano erupted violently, spewing ash 25 miles into the sky. The explosion caused global temperatures to drop and buried entire towns under thick layers of ash. Lahars, or volcanic mudflows, continued to wreak havoc for years. Over 800 people died, and thousands were displaced. The eruption also led to the permanent closure of the U.S. Clark Air Base. The 1976 Moro Gulf earthquake and tsunami struck Mindanao with a magnitude of 7.9. It triggered a massive tsunami that hit coastal communities in the middle of the night, catching residents off guard. Waves as high as 30 feet crashed into towns, killing over 8,000 people. Entire villages were swept away, and thousands more were injured or left homeless. The disaster remains one of the deadliest earthquakes in Philippine history, highlighting the dangers of undersea seismic activity. Typhoon Bopha, locally known as Pablo, struck Mindanao in December 2012. It was the strongest typhoon to ever hit the region, bringing winds of 175 mph and torrential rains. The storm triggered deadly landslides and flash floods, burying entire villages under mud and debris. Over 1,900 people lost their lives, and thousands more were left homeless. The destruction was so severe that some towns were completely erased from the map, leaving survivors struggling to rebuild their lives. The 2017 Marawi siege was not a natural disaster, but it was one of the most devastating conflicts in Philippine history. Islamist militants took control of the city, leading to a 5-month-long battle between government forces and terrorists. Thousands of civilians were trapped, and much of the city was reduced to rubble. Over 1,000 people died, and hundreds of thousands were displaced. The siege left Marawi in ruins, with residents struggling to rebuild their homes and lives. The 2006 Guinsogan landslide in southern Leyte was one of the deadliest landslides in Philippine history. After weeks of heavy rain, an entire mountainside collapsed, burying the village of Guinsogan under tons of mud and rock. Over 1,100 people were killed, including an entire elementary school full of children. Rescue efforts were hampered by the unstable terrain, making it nearly impossible to recover bodies. The tragedy highlighted the dangers of deforestation and poor land management. The 2013 Bohol earthquake struck the Visayas region with a magnitude of 7.2, causing widespread destruction. Historic churches, centuries-old buildings, and homes crumbled under the intense shaking. Over 220 people lost their lives, and thousands were injured. The earthquake triggered deadly landslides, burying entire communities. Roads and bridges collapsed, isolating towns and delaying rescue efforts. The disaster left a lasting impact on the region, with many historical landmarks permanently damaged or lost forever. The 2004 Super Typhoon Winnie was not the strongest storm, but it caused one of the deadliest floods in Philippine history. Torrential rains triggered massive flash floods and landslides, sweeping away entire villages. Over 1,600 people died, many of them drowned or buried under mud. The disaster was worsened by deforestation and poor drainage systems, which made flooding more severe. Survivors were left with nothing, as their homes and livelihoods were completely washed away. The 1990 Luzon earthquake was one of the most destructive earthquakes in Philippine history. With a magnitude of 7.7, it caused massive destruction across Luzon, particularly in Baguio City. Buildings collapsed, burying hundreds of people alive. Landslides blocked roads, making rescue efforts difficult. Over 1,600 people died, and thousands were injured. The disaster exposed the vulnerability of poorly constructed buildings and the need for stricter building codes to withstand future earthquakes. The 1981 MV Doña Paz tragedy remains the deadliest maritime disaster in peacetime history. The passenger ferry collided with an oil tanker, causing a massive fire that engulfed both ships. Over 4,300 people perished, with only a handful of survivors. Many victims were trapped inside the burning ferry, unable to escape. The disaster exposed serious safety lapses in the maritime industry, leading to stricter regulations to prevent similar tragedies in the future.